Mercedes just lost control, and it happened because of one FIA decision. Not an upgrade, not a race, a rule. Because Ferrari has just been given something no team expected. A legal way to fix their biggest weakness mid-season. And that weakness, up to 30 horsepower missing on the straights. The exact reason Mercedes has been dominating every race so far. But here's the part that's making people inside the paddock nervous. Ferrari is not starting from zero. They already have a new engine in development, a completely different concept. And now, they might be allowed to bring it early, which means this is no longer about catching up. This is about flipping the entire competitive order in one move. And if that happens, Mercedes doesn't just lose an advantage. They lose the one thing that made them untouchable. At first, nothing about Ferrari looks urgent. That's what makes this so deceptive. 3 races, 3 podiums, always there, always close, never quite enough to win. And for most teams, that would look like progress, stability, a solid foundation to build on. But inside Ferrari, this is not stability. It's a warning, because when you are consistently second, it means you are not guessing anymore. You already know exactly what is missing. And in Ferrari's case, that missing piece is brutally clear. The engine, a deficit of roughly 25 to 30 horsepower, right where races are decided, on the straights, at full deployment, when every fraction of a second matters. And the data keeps repeating the same story. Corner after corner, Ferrari is competitive, sometimes even better, more stable, more precise, more controlled. But the moment the track opens up, they lose everything, every advantage, every gain, gone in a straight line. And that creates a very specific kind of ceiling. Because no matter how perfect the chassis is, no matter how well the tires are managed, if you cannot defend on the straights, you cannot control the race. You are always reacting, always vulnerable, always one step behind. And that's exactly what Mercedes has been exploiting. Every single race. They don't need to be better everywhere. They only need to be better in one place. The place that matters most. Because with more power and better energy deployment, they decide when to attack, when to defend, when to break the race open. And Ferrari, until now, had no answer. But here's where everything starts to shift. Because Ferrari didn't just identify the problem. They went deeper. They found the cause. Not in the setup, not in the aerodynamics. Inside the engine itself. A structural limitation. Something that doesn't show immediately, but appears over time. As temperature rises, as the race progresses, a slow loss of performance. That turns a competitive car into a defensive one. And once they understood that, everything changed. Because now, this is no longer about improving performance. It's about correcting a flaw. And under FIA rules, that distinction is everything. Because improving is restricted. Correcting can be allowed. And that's the door Ferrari just opened. The same door that Mercedes never expected anyone to use. Because as long as Ferrari was just slower, Mercedes was safe. But the moment Ferrari proves this is a structural issue, that safety disappears. And suddenly, the team that was controlling everything is forced to watch and wait. Because what Ferrari is preparing next is not just an upgrade, it's a shift. One that starts exactly where Mercedes has been strongest. And if that shift works, the entire balance of power changes with it. But here's where this situation becomes impossible for Mercedes to ignore. Because up to now, their advantage has been safe, locked, untouchable under normal rules. They built their entire season around that assumption, that no one could suddenly change their engine, that no one could erase a structural deficit mid-season, that the hierarchy was stable, predictable, controlled. But Ferrari just broke that assumption, and that's what triggered the reaction. Because this is not about Ferrari gaining performance slowly. This is about Ferrari unlocking a different path, a path Mercedes cannot follow. Because while Ferrari can argue correction, Mercedes has nothing to correct. They are already optimized, already at their limit. And in Formula One, being at the limit is dangerous, because it means there's nowhere to go. Now imagine the scenario Mercedes is facing. Ferrari introduces a revised power unit. The deficit drops, not completely, but enough. Enough to stop losing on every straight. Enough to defend. Enough to stay in the fight. And that's all Ferrari needs. Because once that happens, the fight moves away from power and into areas where Ferrari is already strong. Tire management, race pace, consistency over long stints. And that's where the balance shifts, because Mercedes is built to control races from the front, from clean air, from straight-line dominance. But if they can no longer break away, they are forced into a different kind of race, a slower one, a more strategic one, a more controlled one, exactly the kind Ferrari excels in. But here's the deeper problem, because this is not just about performance, it's about information, because every team on the grid has been analyzing Ferrari based on one version, a version with a clear weakness, a version that behaves predictably, a version that can be planned against. But the moment Ferrari changes that, all that data becomes useless. All those simulations, all those strategies, built on something that no longer exists. And that creates uncertainty, because now, Mercedes doesn't know where Ferrari is vulnerable anymore. They don't know where to attack. They don't know where they are safe. And in Formula One, that uncertainty is more dangerous than raw speed, because it forces hesitation. And hesitation is where races are lost. Now add one more layer to this, because Ferrari is not just working on the engine. They are aligning everything. The aerodynamic upgrades, the energy deployment improvements, the cooling system, all synchronized, all designed to peak at the same time. So when this new engine arrives, it doesn't come alone. It comes as part of a complete transformation. And that's what Mercedes is reacting to. Not a single upgrade, but the possibility of everything changing at once. Because if Ferrari times this correctly, there is no gradual warning, no slow progression, just one race, where the gap that defined the season is suddenly gone. And when that happens, Mercedes doesn't just lose an advantage, they lose control. And once control is gone, the entire championship becomes something else, something unpredictable, something unstable, something Ferrari has been quietly preparing for, which leads to the question that is now starting to circulate inside the paddock. Not out loud, but very clearly behind closed doors. Because if Ferrari can legally change their biggest weakness, at the exact moment their rivals cannot respond, then this was never about improving. It was about waiting. Waiting for the exact point where one move changes everything. And this is the moment where everything stops being about performance and starts becoming about control of the future. Because what Ferrari is doing right now is forcing Mercedes into a position they haven't been in for years. Uncertainty, real uncertainty, not about pace, not about setup, about direction. Because for the first time this season, Mercedes doesn't know what version of Ferrari they are about to face. And that changes how you approach everything. Because normally, you develop your car based on what your rival is. You optimize against their weaknesses. You build your strategy around their limits. But what happens when those limits are about to disappear? Because if Ferrari activates this correction, if the new power unit behaves the way they expect, then Mercedes is no longer developing against reality. They're developing against the past. And that's a fatal mistake in Formula One. Now imagine the internal discussions inside Mercedes. Do you stay on your current path, optimizing a car that is already near its peak? Or do you react and try to prepare for a Ferrari that might suddenly be faster? But reacting has a cost. Time, resources, risk, and the biggest problem of all, you might react to something that hasn't fully appeared yet. Which means Ferrari doesn't just gain performance, they force hesitation, they force doubt, and that's where the advantage multiplies. Because while Mercedes is thinking, Ferrari is executing, quietly, precisely, and exactly on schedule. Now here's the part that makes this even more powerful. Ferrari doesn't need perfection. They don't need to become the fastest everywhere. They only need to remove the one scenario where they are always vulnerable, the straights. Because once that vulnerability is gone, everything else falls into place. The tire advantage becomes decisive. The race pace becomes sustainable. The late stints become theirs. And that's when the shift happens. Not at the start of the race, at the end, where championships are decided. But here's the final twist. Because Ferrari is not showing this yet. They are still running the old version, still operating within the known limits, still allowing every team to believe that this is who they are. And that's intentional, because the later they reveal the change, the less time anyone has to respond. And when that reveal finally comes, it won't look like a normal step forward. It will look like a break, a moment where the season splits into two parts, before Ferrari fixed it, and after Ferrari fixed it. And that's the moment Mercedes is trying to anticipate, the one they cannot see clearly, the one they cannot fully prepare for. Because if Ferrari gets this right, If the timing matches the execution, then the reaction we're seeing now is just the beginning. Because what looks like frustration today could turn into something much more serious. The realization that the advantage they built everything on was never permanent. It was just waiting to be taken away. And now we reach the part that no one inside the paddock wants to say out loud. Because if everything Ferrari is preparing actually works, this is not a comeback story. It's a reversal, a complete inversion of power. Because think about how this championship has been built so far. Mercedes leads, controls, dictates the pace. Ferrari follows, adapts, maximizes what they have. That's the structure. That's the order. That's what every team has accepted as reality. But that reality depends on one fragile assumption, that Ferrari's weakness is permanent. And the moment that assumption breaks, everything else collapses with it. Because suddenly, Mercedes is no longer the reference. They become the target. And that changes how pressure works. Because leading is comfortable when you control the variables, when you know where you are stronger, when you decide how the race unfolds. But chasing is different. Chasing forces you to take risks, to push beyond limits, to make decisions without full information. And that's exactly where Ferrari wants Mercedes to be. Not behind on track, but behind in understanding. Now imagine the first race where this shift becomes visible. Not in testing, not in simulations, in real conditions. Lights out, race pace, full pressure. And for the first time, Ferrari is not losing on the straights, not dropping back, not defending. They stay there, lap after lap, matching Mercedes, removing every escape route. And then, something even more important happens. The race reaches its final phase, the point where Ferrari used to fade, where the engine used to lose efficiency, where the gap would open. But this time, it doesn't. This time, Ferrari holds the performance. And that's when the pressure flips completely. Because now Mercedes realizes something in real time. The advantage is gone, not reduced, gone. And in that exact moment, everything changes. Strategy becomes reactive. Drivers start pushing harder than planned. Engine modes get more aggressive. Mistakes become more likely. And Ferrari doesn't need to do anything dramatic. They just need to stay there. Apply pressure. Wait. Because when a dominant team feels that shift, they don't collapse instantly. They crack, little by little, decision by decision, lap by lap, until one moment, where the control they had all season is simply not there anymore. And that's the moment Ferrari has been building toward. Not a race, not an upgrade. A moment, a precise point in time, where everything they've prepared finally aligns. And when it does, it won't feel like Ferrari got better. It will feel like Mercedes lost something they didn't even realize was at risk. Which leads to the final realization, the one that connects every piece of the story. Because if Ferrari understood the rules better, if they identified the weakness earlier, if they timed the correction perfectly, then this was never about closing a gap. It was about creating a moment where the gap disappears and takes the balance of power with it. And when that moment finally arrives, there won't be confusion, there won't be debate. There will only be one question left echoing across Formula One. How did Ferrari turn a weakness into the move that changed everything?